What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be breaking down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of tickers out there. I'm going to break down why tomorrow is going to be a very important day for the entire stock market because we have the PCE data coming out 1 hour before the market opens. This is going to cause a very big gap in either the upside or the downside for tomorrow for the markets. I'm also going to break down what the news is saying about Tesla as Elon Musk is under investigation and what's going on with all the data affecting Tesla for tomorrow. But before I break anything down about all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I'm firstly not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks plus a $50 cash reward. And the offer ends tomorrow, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, now let's talk about Tesla. How are things looking? So looking at Tesla, we had a very sideways day to start us off in the morning. And I warned you guys that there's a possibility that if Tesla started to break out, we could see a test of like the 260 zone. And if we reject it from there, we're just going to be watching these levels going forward. And if anything, Tesla did end up getting that break to 260, but then since then it just traded sideways, getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And it looks like Tesla's getting ready for a very big move tomorrow as we have the PCE report coming out. So I believe Tesla's most likely going to gap up or gap down tomorrow, but it's going to depend on PCE data, which is just like CPI and many other factors. So I first want to talk about these different factors affecting Tesla. I want to talk about what's going on with the market first before I break down these charts real quick. So for tomorrow, 1 hour before the market opens, okay, we have PCE data coming out, which is very similar to CPI, and we have initial jobless claims as well at the same time. Then after that, 30 minutes before the market opens, we have the Collins speaker from the Fed speaking. So Collins is going to be giving a speech. And then 15 minutes after the market opens, we have the Chicago PMI. But out of all of these things, from the Fed speakers to the PMI reports, the most important thing is going to be the PCE data. You have to be paying very close attention to this because the PCE is another measure of inflation used by the Fed. The Fed tends to prioritize PCE over CPI, and CPI could give us some insights on it. So this, by the way, this PCE report is going to be for the month of July, and we already saw the CPI report for July, which could give us some insights. So looking at the data, this is the chart of CPI that came out. This was already reported for July. We saw a slight increase in CPI for all items. Then for core CPI, we actually saw, core CPI just declining just a little bit, but once again maintaining this high stance. So core is very sticky, still quite high, and then CPI in general ended up going up just a little bit. For that reason, when you look at the PCE expectations, we're expecting year over year PCE to be at about 3.2%. I have it highlighted right over here. I know it's a little hard to see, but 3.2% is what we're expecting for PCE to about 3.3%. If it's hotter than that, if we get 3.4% or hotter, that's going to be bearish for the markets. The market's going to likely cool off a bit. If it's very close to expectations, this can have a very mixed response. And if it's lower than expected, like 3.1%, 3%, or something like that, the market may still hold up a lot better. But then it's not just PCE in general. We also have PCE from the core side month over month. So core PCE, we're expecting this to be 4%, very close to what the previous report was. If it's hotter than 4%, this could be bearish for the markets because it's going to be basically the same as the previous report. And if it's cooler than expected, that's going to be good for the market. So watch this very carefully. I believe that core is going to be as expected at 4%, but I'm not too sure about PCE year over year. This is very tricky to predict. The odds do favor it being very close to the forecast, as CPI was very close to its forecast as well, which was hotter than the previous report. Right, we got this increase that was a little bit hotter. So we might see something very similar with PCE. We'll see if that ends up being the case. But honestly, guys, if I could predict this, I would. I don't know what's going to happen with the data. That's why we have to be very careful for tomorrow. But there are some technical aspects I want to break down for Tesla in just a couple of minutes. Let's first talk about a couple of other things. For all this data coming out, we also have some earnings. We have Dollar General, we have UBS, we have Campbell's all in the morning. And then after the market closes, we have Dell announcing its earnings, which is going to be the biggest one for the week. Besides that, there's some more news coming out involving the auto regulators out there. They're asking Tesla to basically provide data on the Elon mode autopilot configuration. Basically, they're talking about how Elon mode is supposed to be like eliminating the nag that basically tells Tesla drivers to keep their hands on the wheel. They're arguing that the problem with Tesla and its design is it leads drivers to take their hands off the wheel for way too long. And they're saying that this could be potentially dangerous. They're investigating this. And in doing so, they're asking for more data from Tesla. They're also asking Tesla to talk in court once again. So this is very important. If anything big comes from this, they could ask Tesla to make some changes to their technology, their FSD updates because of it. So far, we're just waiting for more information to come out. There's also another probe from the SEC now. So at first, we had the NHTSA announcing a probe. The NHTSA is just announcing more and more regulations potentially for Tesla that could be coming out. And now the SEC is getting involved, and they're going to be investigating another potential and possible secret project that was going on. It's known as the House for Elon Musk. Now, I don't know if this is truly the case, but they're arguing that Tesla may be using company funds on a secret project. And they believe that it's very important for the federal prosecutors to investigate Tesla for this reason and potentially even Elon Musk. There's been a lot of talk about this from the SEC, and Elon Musk has expressed his dismay towards the SEC in the past. We're going to see what happens with this as well. This was just barely announced very recently. Musk right now is obviously not happy about this, and we'll see if anything is announced for Tesla, if anything happens. But these investigations going on like crazy is just pretty obscure to me. It's very interesting how everything's happening at once simultaneously as well. But anyways, don't want to talk about any conspiracies. Let's talk about the inventory levels. One thing that's not too good for Tesla is the Model Y is maintaining relatively high inventory levels. So is the Model X. Now, the Model 3 is starting to catch up and going up, which tells us that there's a backlog of these inventories that are just continuing to hoard up and up and up, which tells us that there may be a slowdown in demand. There most likely is one right now. And this is just what we expect in a high interest rate environment. Remember, yesterday, the GDP numbers suggested that the growth in the economy would have been slower than previously expected, from a 2.4% increase in GDP for the second quarter to 2.1% instead. So we're entering more contraction in the economy. This is once again very important, and this is continuing to hurt Tesla, at least to some extent, as of right now. Now, Tesla had higher volume. We did see some buying pressure today, but this started to slow down just a little bit. It wasn't really that horrible overall. Tesla held up quite decently. It was very flat for the day overall in its close. Let's see what happens with this high volume, especially amidst the big data coming out. For the overall ratings for Tesla's continuing to get an equal weight rating. And then looking at the price pairs ratio, this is continuing to maintain this higher stance, which is pretty decent for Tesla. And seasonality doesn't really matter as much, at least for tomorrow, since we're reacting to some data. The short interest went up to about 36 million on Monday, so we're seeing a little bit more shorting on Tesla. That could have led Tesla to pumping quite a bit as it did earlier during the week. But now the question is, how on earth will the market move? And this is my answer. You're going to want to be watching Apple. Apple is going to be the most important stock, at least for the next 1.5 weeks. This is what's driving the momentum in the markets. Apple was pumping very hard, and this is an absolute giant. There are two possibilities for tomorrow. Either I see Apple maybe trying to fill this gap. Maybe we get kind of like an island reversal where we gap up, then we hit this 190 area, then we reject off, and then we start cooling off after that. So a gap up, a little bit of a pump, then a drop after that could be happening tomorrow. Or we see Apple with the market kind of cool off immediately. So I'm anticipating a cool off, most likely being the case for Apple, which is going to dictate Tesla. I think Tesla's going to likely follow the trend. So when we look at Tesla, right, this is what Tesla's looking like. Let's just pull up this chart. Tesla will likely, in my opinion, either gap up tomorrow if the PC numbers are decent, if the market kind of likes them, and maybe make an attempt to push up just a little bit, maybe retest this 260 area, maybe go a little higher and possibly form like a bearish divergence, then start cooling off, come back down to fill this gap like this, and maybe just trade very, very flat in this range for a bit of a cool off tomorrow going into Friday. This seems very possible, something like this. This would be like the more bullish case where we get that bounce first off. And then for tomorrow, what if the inflationary numbers are kind of bad? What if we get a hot PCE? We could see Tesla gap down with the market, kind of cool off, then just slowly drop to these lower levels to about 252 in a very healthy manner, and then make an attempt up intraday, but still close a little bit in the red. Now, I feel like the red one down here, let me just change the colors just so that this is easier to distinguish. The red line right here looks a little bit more probable. It seems a little bit more likely like Tesla may gap down with the PCE data than cool off a little bit, because Tesla and many stocks out there are very overbought. But even if we do gap up thanks to PCE, we could still see the market cool off over time because of how overbought we are. I'm in the middle, guys. I don't know which way the market's going to gap because of PCE, but I'm leaning a tiny bit more. So I'm super close to the middle, but I'm leaning a tiny bit more in this direction towards like the Tesla potentially gapping down and cooling off just a bit. But just to be safe, we want to be open-minded. We want to be calm, cool, and collected and just make sure, wait for the data to come out just to be as safe as possible. But this is what I find very, very likely. Now, as far as Aapl goes, Aapl is approaching a very important level. It's getting closer and closer to its gap. So I'm seeing the two possibilities just like this. Either Aapl gaps up tomorrow off PCE, fills the gap to 190, then comes right back down and starts cooling off a bit because it's very, very overbought right now on the RSI. Let me just show you the RSI on Aapl. On the 4-hour time frame, the RSI is almost at 80 for Aapl. So very, very overbought. It is due for a very healthy pullback, in my opinion. So either it kind of like gaps up and then starts cooling off a bit, or it could gap down with the PCE data. I can't really predict which way it's going to open. And then we start to just cool off after that. So I'm seeing these as the two most likely possibilities because of how overbought it is, and it's going to be affecting the whole market. All right. So SPY is going to follow the trend most likely. SPY is also quite overbought on the 4-hour time frame. Not as overbought as Aapl, but it is another possibility. On SPY, I just want to look at the RSI real quick. SPY's RSI and these other indicators are quite overbought. The RSI is at 74. It's been pumping like crazy. So I think it's going to follow Aapl, basically copy Aapl, where it either gaps up, pushes up a little bit more, then it starts dropping, or it might just kind of like gap down and start dropping a little bit from here. One of these is most likely going to be the case. Either we gap up and drop, or we just like kind of drop. I'm leaning a little bit more towards this direction of us opening just under like 450 and then kind of cooling off a little bit because of how overbought we are. I think it's a little bit more probable, but just to be safe, we have to wait and see. Make sure you're open-minded. Make sure you're ready for PCE. That's going to be very telling for tomorrow. Now, for the QQQ, same thing as SPY. You know, we could gap up again tomorrow and get very close to the 380 before getting a rejection and coming back down to fill this gap, maybe dropping a little bit more. It depends on if we gap up or not. If we gap up, we might not drop as hard. It might just be a very slight drop. If we end up gapping down, we could see this thing cool off and drop pretty hard before getting a little bounce. This is also very overbought on its technical indicators. Let me just show you what the QQQ is looking like right here. On the 4-hour time frame, the RSI is currently at 72 on the QQQ. So either it gaps up a little bit, then it starts to cool off a bit, or it might just cool off as soon as we see the data from the PCE. So be very, very careful for tomorrow. PCE could also be quite unpredictable, so you just have to be open-minded. For Nvidia, this one's looking very interesting to me because we have a rising wedge, and I believe Nvidia will most likely either continue to respect this wedge for a little bit longer. It depends on the news for tomorrow and etc. It either respects this wedge a little bit longer, tries to push up a little bit more, then we end up getting this rug pull, right? It breaks down from the wedge in a very healthy manner, retests these low levels before trying to bounce later on, or it might gap down tomorrow and just start cooling off to retest like 480 or so, then bounce from there. Either of those are very possible. Now, for Nvidia, what's good is we do have a possible cup and handle as of right now. But we'll see if we end up establishing a new market structure because the market structure is still bullish, right? We're making higher highs and higher lows still. We'll see if we get a switch in that because sometimes these inflationary measures could be the big triggers for that. So let's see if Nvidia maintains this rising wedge after PC and then breaks down, or if it just breaks down as soon as we open tomorrow. It's got to be one of those two most likely. It depends on PCE, of course. It depends on the inflationary numbers. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm leaning a little bit more in this favor right here. The red line I have drawn out seems a little bit more probable, but just to be safe, we always want to be open-minded. So finally for Tesla, let's talk about Tesla real quick. How may Tesla end up moving? Like I said before, we could see Tesla once again try to gap up or gap down in one direction. It depends on PCE. My gut tells me this is just like what my guess would be. Guys, don't take this too seriously. Let's just take this with a grain of salt because I can't predict what PCE is going to be like. But I think we might gap down tomorrow and just cool off a little bit in a very healthy manner before trying to bounce just a little bit. And we may get another red day for Tesla for tomorrow. That's very possible. I say that because of the fact that PCE in general may be a little bit hot, just like how CPI was. Not too sure about the core side, so we just want to be open-minded nonetheless. Now, another thing that's a little bit of a red flag for me, I'm just going to switch over to weeble from this point would be the dollar. The dollar is approaching support right now. So a lot of these stocks are approaching their resistances, and then the dollar's approaching support. It's been free falling, but you could see it came very close to where our 200 EMA happens to be on the 4-hour time frame. It looks like the dollar is it just continued to drop and drop and drop without much of a balance, but it's approaching support. And then it also hit 103 and also the 200 EMA on the daily chart. It hit this. So could we see a small bounce in the dollar first? If that's the case tomorrow, this could cause the market to slow down. So just watch this very carefully. Let's see if the dollar bounces off the 200 EMA or not. Today it tried to hold the 200. We'll see if this holds. If it holds, the market may cool off. If not, that's going to be our indicator. So watch that carefully if you are interested. The VIX also came extremely close to, if not completed, filling the gap that formed. Let me just show you where the gap is. The gap basically existed right here on the VIX. And I think we filled the gap. We basically filled the gap already. So will the VIX bounce from here after filling the gap? There's a possibility of that because we saw the VIX bounce off this support zone previously. So the VIX tells me that the market might actually push a little bit more, maybe gap up and then end up dropping. That's what that's suggesting because we're not at major support just yet around the 13 flat area. We're at like 13.9. So maybe the market kind of like gaps up tomorrow, then it starts cooling off. That's what the VIX is telling us. The dollar is telling us something kind of different. So it's very mixed. But either way, these indicators are telling us that a cool off should be coming soon, right? The SPX is currently close to resistance around this 4,500 range. Could it go a little higher and then end up cooling off, or will it just cool off from open? That's possible. The Nasdaq is at 14,000 exactly. It's at resistance. We'll see if this holds, if it can break or not. It might reject off here temporarily before trying to bounce. It may retest this breakout area right here at 13,800. If the Nasdaq cools off a bit, it could be because of Aapl. We'll have to wait and see for the time being. Now, for just a couple of other tickers, and Google looks relatively strong. There's not much of a sign of weakness. We're going to be watching 137 tomorrow. Do we gap down below and then try breaking it, or do we try to hold up? We're going to be watching 137 resistance. We got rejected off here last time, so we'll see if it rejects or not. But so far, there's not much of a sign of weakness. Meta could be forming a cup and handle on the 4-hour time frame. It's not looking like it's done with the handle, so it could drop a little bit more. It's about this like 290 area and eventually like 285. So we're going to be watching that very, very carefully. We're going to be watching to see if that breaks or not. For Amazon, we're going to be watching to see if this thing could hold these higher levels around the 135s. If we break below this, you're going to be watching 134.5 to be retested. It's very tight and indecisive right now, so just watch and see which direction it breaks in. Besides that, there's not a whole lot else for me to talk about, maybe like AMD. AMD is up just like Nvidia, but like I said before, one thing that's a little concerning would be the fact that although it's pumping the way it has been, although this is on a bullish trend, everything could change depending on the PCE report. If we break below 105, I expect this to come all the way down to like this 10. Well, it's going to test this level right here first, like 103.5 if 105 breaks. If it breaks above 108, it could go all the way up to 109.5. So I'm kind of in the middle. But with that said, guys, I went over the majority of the stocks out there. I thank you all so much for listening. Make sure you watch Tesla very carefully and the PCE report. Let's see which way the market gaps, either up or down tomorrow, and we'll see what happens from there. The odds do favor some kind of pullback because Tesla is forming a bearish divergence on the RSI. But like I said, we'll see which way we gap, which is going to determine how severe of a pullback it is, right? We could pull back a little bit, or it could be a lot bigger, depending on if we gap up or gap down. So we'll just have to wait and see for that. With that said, thank you all so much for listening. Have an absolutely spectacular rest of the day. Get ready for tomorrow. We're going to see some big data and some high volatility. It's going to be very fun to trade. So get ready and do what you have to do, guys. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. The market's to the moon as the long term is still incredibly bright. And peace out.